It might take years to truly understand what effect classroom closures and online learning has had on students during the pandemic, but a new study is giving us an early look at how student learning has fared. Bloomberg Quick Take reporter Jennifer Zabasaja is here now to walk us through some of the findings. Jen, it's good to see you this morning. What are the key findings from this report?
Yeah, so Tim, this report came from a nonprofit organization. It's called the NWEA. And who they are, just to give you some context, they're a nonprofit organization that administer education tests to students each year. So I don't know if you remember, Tim, but every year they give out an annual MAP a test to students, which stands for Measure of Academic Progress. So it's just sort of a gauge at how students are doing each year. And what they found from this report, and again, it's early findings, as you mentioned, was that students fared a little bit better than they anticipated. I think they were expecting the worst, right? When classrooms closed and students went to online learning. But they found that students were actually doing okay. And in particular, they found that students in grades 3 through 8, especially in grades 3 through 8, did okay in reading for the most part. But where they did see a little bit of impact was in math, which, I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, think about being a third grader who is sitting on a computer doing math. And so that was a bit concerning for them. But the biggest concern that they found from this report is really just the lack of data that they typically get from these MAP tests. So they said that there was a significant portion of students who just didn't take the test this fall. So they had 4.4 million students take the test, but a lot of students who typically take these tests just didn't. And they noticed many of the students who didn't take these tests happened to be minority students, which could paint sort of not a great picture for these students coming up in the next school year.
What are the implications of that, Jen? Does that mean the students aren't even participating in online learning? Or does it just mean that they're faring much worse than students from other backgrounds?
I think what they're saying is that, of course, these are just early findings, right? But it is concerning to find that some students just didn't take this test altogether in the fall. We know that there have been disparities in the students who are going back into classrooms, students who are doing online learning. But the biggest concern is really that there's a significant portion of students who are going to need to catch up to these other students who haven't necessarily been affected by remote learning. And so that's what these experts are saying, that, you know, classrooms and teachers and especially parents, right? Because parents have sort of stepped in and had to sort of help be the teachers in some cases when they're at home. But how do you ensure that these students are able to catch up and don't necessarily down the road 3, 4, 5, 10 years later see this pandemic closure and these disruptions really affect how, you know, these kids end up learning and progress throughout their lives?
Okay, so what are the implications of perhaps these findings and other findings as school districts and mayors weigh what to do about school in the coming weeks and coming months as the pandemic continues?
I think, you know, what we actually heard from Dr. Fauci just this past weekend. And, you know, what we've really learned is that the kids really have a different effect on, have a different reaction to the virus than initially thought, right? So initially it was thought that the virus spreads through the kids and the kids bring it home to the parents, which is why there were so many closures that we saw in classrooms. But Dr. Fauci now indicated, you know, that it's not transmitting as much as we initially thought with these students. And so classrooms should start reopening. And I think we're seeing that happening throughout the country. I mean, you also saw earlier this week, Mayor Bill de Blasio here in New York City announced that New York City schools are going to reopen on December 7th. And, you know, that was a pretty swift move by him, especially after deciding to close schools again. And, you know, we're hearing from other school districts that they might follow suit in the next few weeks and months, just because of the way that kids respond and, you know, react to this virus and sort of what's happening in terms of the disruptions in their education. You know, with young kids, as we know, Tim, in-person learning is so critical. You know, it's not easy for young kids to be learning math or reading at a computer at home. And so, you know, having that interaction, being able to engage with other kids and knowing that, you know, they're not going to be as hard hit by the virus as older grades, I think is really changing the mindset of a lot of school districts around the country.
Bloomberg Quick Take reporter Jennifer Zebasaja, thanks so much for your time. Good to see you today.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.